I never thought I'd be in a situation where I'd be writing to a subreddit about betrayal, but here I am. It's raw, real, and honestly, I still can't believe I'm even admitting this out loud, let alone putting it out into the world. It started a couple of weeks ago, right after I'd planned everything for the wedding. My fiancée, Claire, and I had been together for 5 years. I thought I knew her, the way she smiled when she was excited, the way she'd brush her hair back when she was nervous, the little things that made her, well, her. And I trusted her. Too much, maybe. Our apartment was small but cozy. I liked to think it was our little sanctuary. When I came home from work, I'd find her in the kitchen, humming to herself, or sprawled out on the sofa with her laptop, giggling at something on her screen. It was all normal, or so I thought. The wedding was supposed to be our big step, the start of a new chapter. I remember feeling excited, a little anxious but mostly hopeful. We had this beautiful day planned out, and I was ready to say I do and finally call her my wife. But that's when everything started to crack. It was a rainy Saturday and I had gone out to pick up some last-minute stuff. When I got back, I saw her sitting on the balcony, texting furiously. She looked tense, her jaw clenched so tight her cheeks were twitching. I called her name softly, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she quickly shoved her phone into her pocket and looked away. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my stomach was already turning. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just a little stressed. Wedding stuff, you know." I nodded, though something felt off. Later that night, I was looking for her phone, just a quick check, honestly, because I wanted to make sure everything was in order. That's when I saw it. A message thread from someone named Mike, with pictures attached. They were intimate, not just friendly banter, but full-on photos that made my stomach drop. Some of her leaning into him on the couch, their faces close, caught in a moment that was so clearly not platonic. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How could I have missed this? How could she? And then I saw the worst part. She'd used the wedding gift, a small engraved box I'd picked out myself to hide the proof. The box was open, the jewelry inside, but the necklace was missing. Instead, I found a tiny folded-up piece of paper tucked beneath the jewelry, a receipt. An expensive dinner, a hotel stay, and a note. "Sorry, I couldn't wait." My hands went cold. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears like a thunderstorm echoing inside my skull. She'd been planning this for a while, and she'd used my gift to hide the evidence. That's when I knew I'd been blind, or maybe just too trusting. Either way, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying those images, her face smiling so innocently on our wedding day, and now I knew what she'd been hiding. Everything suddenly felt like a lie. The next morning, I sat there, staring at her, at Claire, while she slept. Her chest rose and fell softly, unaware of what I'd found. It was like I'd been living in a fog, and now the fog was lifting, revealing something ugly underneath. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just felt this cold, burning need to get back at her, to make her pay for what she'd done. I started planning then and there. I didn't want her to get away with this. I knew I had to do something, and I wanted it to hurt just as much as her betrayal had hurt me. I had no idea how I was going to do it yet, but I was done being the naive fool. From this moment on, she was going to regret ever crossing me. And I could feel the adrenaline building, sharp and relentless, as I plotted my next move. But first, I had to keep my cool. I had to act carefully, because once I made my move, there was no going back. That night, after I'd gone through everything, the messages, the receipt, even the jewelry box that now felt like a tomb, I couldn't sit still. My stomach was in knots, my palms were slick with sweat, and my head kept spinning with questions I didn't want to face. How long had this been going on? Was it just that night, or was this an ongoing affair? I kept rereading the messages, looking for some kind of pattern, some sign I'd missed. But what hit me hardest was the way she'd used the wedding gift to hide it all. I thought I knew her, but I'd been so blind. The trust I'd placed in her now felt like a bone-deep lie. It was like a slap in the face, knowing she'd gone behind my back with someone I thought was just a neighbor, a guy I'd even considered a friend. The thing that cut the deepest, though, was that feeling of betrayal. That sickening sense that I had been played, used, even. I'd always imagined my wedding day as a beautiful moment, a promise of forever. Instead, it felt like I'd been set up for a fall. I needed to get out of that apartment, clear my head. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside into the cold night air. The street was quiet, just the distant hum of cars and the gentle rustle of leaves. I could feel my heart pounding, a mixture of anger and disappointment. I kept telling myself, stay calm, think this through, but inside I was boiling. I was furious more than I'd ever been, and I knew I had to act fast. I decided I'd confront her in the morning. No point doing it tonight when I was this upset. But before I did, I had to plan. She might have thought she could hide this forever, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed to make her regret everything. Over the next few days, I gathered evidence, screenshots of the messages, the receipt, and even some photos I found saved on her phone that she hadn't deleted. I kept everything in a folder, locked behind a password I knew she didn't have. I also started digging into her phone, her social media, trying to find out if she'd been sneaking around with anyone else. What I discovered was worse than I expected. Apparently, Mike wasn't just some guy she met that night. She'd been sneaking around with him for months. Little trips, secret conversations, even plans to move away together. It was all laid out in her texts. I felt sick reading it, like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. The full extent of her deception made my stomach churn. I realized this wasn't just about some fling. This was her crossing a line, betraying everything we'd built. I pictured her with Mike in some hotel room sharing stolen moments while I'd been planning our wedding, trying to build a future. It was like someone had taken a knife and stabbed me right in the back. That's when I decided I'd had enough. I was done being her fool. I needed to send a message, not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever trusted her. If she thought she could cheat, lie, and use my gift as a hiding spot, then she had another thing coming. I wasn't going to just walk away and forget. No, I was going to make her regret this betrayal in a way she'd never see coming. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at everything I'd compiled. My mind was racing with ideas, how to expose her, how to make her feel as small as she'd made me feel. I knew I couldn't just confront her and hope for the best. That wouldn't be enough. I needed a plan, something precise, something cold. I turned off the lights, feeling the weight of what was coming. I'd broken trust that I thought was unbreakable, and once I executed my plan, there'd be no turning back. The silence of the room pressed down on me, thick and heavy, but I felt an odd sense of clarity. I knew exactly what I had to do next, and when I did it, she'd see just how much she'd underestimated me. The plan started to form in my head like a dark blueprint. I knew I had to be careful, cold, calculated. I wasn't about to give her a chance to spin her web of lies again. Everything I'd found, every piece of evidence, was going to be used against her, but in a way that would leave her no room to wiggle out. The first step was to make her think I was still oblivious. I didn't want her to suspect I was onto her, so I played it cool, acted like everything was normal. She'd come home from work, I'd greet her with a smile, and act like I hadn't touched her phone or looked through her stuff. In the meantime, I was gathering more details, more dirt, just enough to pull the rug out from under her when the time was right. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen baking some cookies. She looked innocent enough, but I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes. I kept the tone light. "You seem distracted," I said casually, leaning against the counter. "Anything you want to tell me?" She hesitated, then forced a laugh. "No, just stressed. Wedding stuff is a nightmare, you know." "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I get it, but I think I know everything now." Her face froze, then she tried to cover it up with that fake smile she'd been wearing lately. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, the folder with all the evidence I'd collected. I let her see the screenshots, the receipt, the photos I'd taken from her phone. Her face drained of color. "I found all this," I said softly. "The messages, the hotel, her using the wedding gift to hide it all. Were you planning to keep this a secret forever?" She stared at the screen, then looked away. Her hands trembled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," I challenged, "because I've got proof. And honestly, I don't think you even realize how much you've screwed up. But don't worry, I'm not here to yell or scream. I just want to know one thing, what the hell was going through your mind?" She opened her mouth, then shut it again. The guilt was written all over her face, but she still clung to denial. That's when I realized I had her cornered. No more games. I was ready to take the gloves off. "I've made my decision," I said, voice low and steady. You lied, you cheated, and you thought you could get away with it, but I'm done. You're not just a liar, you're a thief of trust, and I want you gone today." Her eyes widened in shock. "You can't do this." "Oh, I'm doing it," I interrupted. "And I will, because enough is enough. I don't need a cheater in my life. I don't need this kind of betrayal. I want you out of my house, out of my life. And I want to know who else you've been lying to." She looked like she was about to cry, but I didn't care. The rage inside me was boiling over, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I had her bag packed and waiting by the door. I handed her a piece of paper with her address and told her to get out. She hesitated, voice trembling. "You really want me gone?" "Yes," I said. "I want nothing to do with you anymore. Maybe this is the wake-up call you needed." I watched her leave, feeling a strange mix of relief and anger. The house suddenly felt empty, hollow. I could still see her face, the betrayal in her eyes, and I knew this wasn't just a breakup. It was the end of something I'd invested 5 years into. But I also felt a strange sense of liberation. I'd taken control. I'd turned the tables. And now I had the power to make her regret it. I was finally in the driver's seat, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. As she drove off, I stood at the doorway, watching her disappear down the street. My fists clenched, my jaw tight. The next step was clear. I had to follow through with my revenge, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. I just had to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, she'd understand what it meant to betray someone who trusted her, because I was done playing nice. The silence that followed her departure felt heavier than I expected. It was like standing in a room filled with fog, thick, suffocating, and impossible to breathe freely. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just go off half-cocked. I had to make her pay in a way she'd never forget. I didn't waste any time. I went straight to my computer and started building my plan. I had the evidence, yes, but what I needed now was to make sure she truly understood the consequences of her actions. I wanted her to feel the burn, the sting of betrayal, but I also wanted to hit her where it hurt most, her reputation. First, I created a fake email account using a burner phone I'd bought anonymously. I needed to reach out to Mike, but I didn't want her to suspect anything. I sent him a message, carefully crafted, pretending to be a mutual acquaintance. I told him I knew about his affair with Claire, that I had proof, and warned him that if he didn't cut ties immediately, I'd make everything public. Within minutes, he responded, nervous, defensive, but also apologetic. I could practically hear the sweat in his thumbs as he typed. I told him I wasn't interested in blackmail. Instead, I just wanted to make sure he understood that I was watching. That was enough to rattle him. I could tell he was starting to realize I wasn't the fool she'd painted me to be. Next, I researched her online presence. Her social media pages, her email accounts, her phone number, everything I could find. I set up a few fake profiles, started commenting on her posts, subtly hinting she'd been caught. I was careful not to be obvious, but enough to make her paranoid. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable. I also made a quick call to a friend who worked in a local newspaper's online section. I explained the situation, hinting I had evidence of her infidelity and deception. I told him I wasn't interested in causing her any real harm, just wanted her to understand that her reputation was fragile. He said he'd look into it, and I could almost see the wheels turning in his mind. Meanwhile, I cleaned up the house, packed some of my essentials, and left her a note on the table. "This isn't over. You screwed up, and now I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Don't come back." I didn't write any more. I just left her to stew in her own mess. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. I'd finally taken control. This wasn't just about ending the relationship. It was about sending her a message. She could run, hide, deny, but I was going to make her regret this every day of her life. Now I just had to wait. Patience wasn't exactly my strong suit, but I knew the longer I let her think she's safe, the more vulnerable she'd become. I was setting up a trap, and soon the truth would come crashing down on her like a tidal wave. The first signs of the fallout started showing up that very night. I checked my phone, and sure enough, some of her friends had messaged, asking if she was okay. They'd seen the rumors spreading online. She was panicked, trying to maintain her image, but I knew her secret was out. I didn't have to do anything more right away. I'd made her feel exposed, vulnerable. That was enough for now. I could feel my heart pounding with satisfaction. This was just the beginning, and I was finally in control of the situation. The next step was waiting for her to come crawling back, and when she did, I'd be ready. The game was on, and I knew I'd win. That's what matters most. The days that followed were like watching a storm build overhead, quiet, tense, and dangerous. I kept my distance, letting her stew in her shame, her panic. Every time I checked my phone, I saw more messages from her friends and even some of her social media posts that suddenly seemed off. Less confident, more frantic. She was trying to cover her tracks, but I was already several steps ahead. I stayed calm on the surface, but inside I was seething. My plan was working. Every lie, every attempt to spin the story was unraveling faster than she could control. I began to hear whispers from mutual friends, comments about her weird behavior, and someone even mentioned seeing her crying in a cafe. The cracks in her facade kept widening, and I was the architect of her downfall. One afternoon, I decided it was time to make my next move. I'd been gathering enough dirt, enough proof of her lies, and now I was ready to show her what she'd lost. I wanted her to see she couldn't escape this. That's when I reached out to her directly, pretending to be sympathetic. "Hey," I messaged her. "I know things are rough right now, but I just want you to know I'm not trying to punish you. I want us to be honest. Maybe we can talk." She responded almost instantly. Her message was a desperate plea, something about regret, about how she never meant for it to go this far. I played it cool, kept my tone soft but firm. "Fine," I replied. "Let's talk, in person, tomorrow. Be ready to answer some questions." I knew she'd come. She'd be desperate to explain herself, to fix what she'd broken. That's what made this so perfect. I wanted her to come to me, to face me, so I could watch her squirm. The next day I prepared myself. I went to a local cafe, sat at a corner table, and waited. When she arrived, her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. She looked like someone who'd been caught in a trap and didn't know how to get out. "Look," I started, voice low, "we both know what you did. You betrayed me, used my trust, and lied to my face for months. You think I'm just going to forgive and forget?" She looked down, tears spilling over. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was stupid. I was drunk on attention and I lost control. Please, I didn't want to ruin everything." I raised a hand to stop her. "Enough, I don't want your excuses. I want you to understand what you've done. You're not just cheating, you're destroying everything we built, and I want you to understand what I'm going to do next." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in, voice cold and sharp. "You're going to regret this, because I'm making sure everyone knows exactly who you are. I've already started. You can't hide from what's coming." She looked at me, trembling, pleading. "Please don't do this. I'll fix it, I swear." "No," I said quietly. "You don't get to fix this. You made your bed, Claire. Now I'm going to make sure you sleep in it." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the evidence, screenshots, messages, her plans with Mike. I slid everything across the table so she could see it all. Her face went pale as she stared at what I'd laid out. "You see," I said, voice steady, "this isn't just about me being hurt. It's about you losing everything, your reputation, your friends, maybe even your future. I want you to think about that every time you try to lie your way out." She broke down then, sobbing quietly. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. I'd finally made her face the consequences. The next step was executing the final part of my plan, making sure she paid in a way that hit her where it mattered most. As she left the cafe, I watched her stumble away, her shoulders hunched, her face streaked with tears. That moment felt like the end of something. I just didn't know whether it was the end of her or the beginning of my revenge. Either way, I knew she'd never look at me the same way again. And that's exactly how I wanted it. That evening, I finally sat down with everything I'd gathered, knowing that once I put my plan into motion, there was no turning back. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like I'd been holding my breath for too long, and now I was finally able to exhale. The countdown was on, and I was ready to deliver the blow that would make her regret ever crossing me. I prepared my final message, an email carefully crafted, filled with the evidence of her lies, her betrayal, and her manipulations. I made sure every detail was clear, every lie exposed. I knew she'd be expecting some grand confrontation, some shouting match, but this was different. This was about making her understand that she'd lost not just me, but her reputation, her credibility, her dignity. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. My heart was pounding fiercely. It wasn't fear, just that primal adrenaline. That comes with revenge. The last thing I wanted was for her to think she could escape unscathed. No, I wanted her to feel every ounce of what she'd put me through. 3 deep breaths and I hit send. The email went out to all her social circles, her friends, her family, anyone who needed to know what kind of person she really was. I pressed send and watched as the little spinning circle turned into a confirmation. It was done. The immediate aftermath was almost satisfying. Her phone started ringing nonstop, texts, calls, messages flooding in from people demanding answers. I kept my phone silent, knowing I'd set the wheels in motion. I'd given her a taste of her own medicine, public shame, exposure, the kind of fallout she'd never recover from overnight. I felt a strange, almost euphoric sense of relief. I'd taken control again. I'd finally told her, I see you for what you are. You can't lie, cheat, or manipulate your way out of this. And I was done playing the fool. That night I packed a small bag, just enough to get through a few days while I figured out my next steps. I handed over the keys to the apartment, my apartment, and left her standing there alone and exposed. I didn't look back. I just walked away, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sitting in a new, quiet space, I realized something. The pain of betrayal hurts, but it also clears your vision. It strips away the illusions you cling to and forces you to see reality for what it is. Claire's betrayal was a brutal wake-up call, but it was also the push I needed to finally stand up for myself. Looking back now, I know I could have gone down a different path. I could have chosen forgiveness or tried to mend what was broken. But I didn't want to, not this time. Sometimes betrayal isn't just a heartbreak, it's a wake-up call that you're better off without someone dragging you down. So my advice, trust your gut. When you see those red flags, no matter how small, address them. Because once they pile up, ignoring them only makes the fall worse. And when someone crosses the line, don't be afraid to take control. Revenge isn't about petty payback. It's about reclaiming your dignity and making damn sure they understand what they lost. I handed over my keys, closed that chapter, and walked away knowing I'd finally taken back my life. Sometimes, the best revenge is just walking out the door and never looking back.